Hello, I am Kari Samuels, your intuitive counselor and happiness coach, and I'm so happy to be sharing this with you today. We are going to be talking about the very lighthearted topic of karma and karmic clearing. Now, I have been, so if you're watching this in the future, we're recording this now here at the end of January 2019 live on Facebook. And if you're watching this later, I am going to be talking about some specifics about why this karmic clearing is so important right now this year. And you can utilize these techniques and what we're talking about, whether you're listening to this in 2026 or anytime in the future. It doesn't matter. Because the principles we're talking about, karma is a universal law. And so that's something that's going to be pertinent no matter when you're listening to this. And it's very important right now. There's a very specific reason why I'm choosing to talk about this now in January of 2019, because this year, for those of you who've been following me, you know that every year I do a forecast, not just the forecast that I have on YouTube, but at something called the 2019 Premium Psychic Forecast. And if I'll put the link to that below if you're interested in learning more about that. And what happens during that is I really, really go in depth with all of the planets, all the numerology, all of the spiritual lessons of the year. I tune into my guides, tune into the energy, and divine what's happening for the entire year. It's a little mind-blowing this year. It's very mind-blowing this year because you've heard me talk about how 2019 is a year of renewal and joy and expression and fun and all this incredible newness and new opportunities. Yet there is also an energy about 2019 that's very much about endings as much as it's about beginnings. Even though you've spent the last like 7 or 8 years really tuning into your soul and figuring out what you want and letting go of a lot. Like, I mean, really, haven't you? You've been letting go of so much. And soul searching. This year is very much about summing up those lessons that you've been learning for many years, possibly many lifetimes, because karma is a lifetime, past life situation that manifests in your life now. So I want to explain, so I'm going to explain what karma is and what karma isn't, and how you can end your karmic cycles. Now, before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of background about how I divined some of this information or learned about it, because I'm by no means like a Buddhist monk or anything. There's some incredible people that can see your karma right there. So in addition to reading some of those people and reading Edgar Cayce, who wrote about karma, and scholars and Buddhists, I have my personal experience from what I learned with my spirit guides when I was doing one-on-one readings, psychic intuitive readings, for over 20 years. So in these readings, even before I even understood it, so as a psychic, my specialty has always been reading your subconscious beliefs, reading your subconscious blocks, reading what your fears are in your energy field, reading all these things that are keeping you stuck, and also reading some of your past life influences. So when I first started doing this, so it's interesting in a weird way, right? Because like a lot of psychics, you think of them as divining the future. And even though from that you can see future possibilities and probabilities, I'm more of a healer in what I do. And so I always want to help people heal their past so that they can create a more magnificent future. It's a more empowering process than simply telling you what may or may not happen. It's saying, okay, this is where, so when I read energy, future casting, it's more like, okay, this is where you are now, and this is all the stuff that's getting in your way. And this is what you really want. So how do we clear some of these patterns and beliefs and energies so that you can create the life you want? So those patterns that I pick up on, those like limiting beliefs or core limiting beliefs, however you want to refer to it, they are what my spirit guides had always referred to as karmic patterns. So what is that? You know, a lot of people have a misconception of what karma is. And one of the things that really, in a way, shocked me, maybe, or was a thing that's made me say, when I was doing all these readings, it was one of those things where I would continually see like why bad things happen to good people. And because I am such an empath, and boundaries has been one of my biggest life lessons, and giving too much of my energy and myself, and those were the kind of people I tend to attract as well, because as I move through my karmic patterns and my karmic lessons, that's who I can help most, right? And that's part of how karma works, and that's how part of your life purpose works. Because like, what is your greatest challenges, and when you overcome it, it also becomes the gift that you give to the world. That's the journey of the wounded healer in a way. So I would see these karmic patterns in people, and they were all typically in financial woes or oppressive relationships, by being almost too good. What we would perceive as too good. And so this helped me understand more of what karma is and what it isn't. So we have this belief that we've been conditioned that like we're creating good karma by always giving or always doing good deeds, and that bad karma, like this label of good and bad, which really isn't how karma works, because even people who have malicious intentions and bad deeds, like I'm thinking of some billionaires that have no compassion for people being furloughed right now, and they're like, whatever, let them eat cake, right? So they might come back in another life as someone in financial distress who needs people to help them, not as punishment, right? But as a learning lesson to how to have more compassion. So karma is not about punishment. It never is about punishment. It's more about balance and compassion and the true meaning of love. And that being said, there was this, there's also karmic lessons in giving too much, and in taking on other people's stuff that doesn't belong to you. And that's in particular what I want to talk to you about today. And this is why, even though this is a big lesson for us in 2019, and I'll explain more in a minute, this is part of why I want to talk to you about this, because this is, I know who I'm talking to. I don't think I need to be talking to people right now about, you know, evil intentions or like not having compassion. You probably have compassion fatigue, and you probably are wondering, you know, why you don't get reciprocated or remunerated financially, or why don't you receive the love or respect that you want enough. And this was a lot of the karmic patterns that I recognized in my clients when I was doing readings, and of course now in my continued coaching. What I see, and I do also coach other light workers to be light workers, right? And that's my passion. And so this is why I'm sharing this with you now, because I don't want you to have totally good intentions and then not get what you deserve. So let's break this down. We talked about what karma isn't, right? It's not punishment, and it's not necessarily something that affects only people with bad intentions or bad deeds. Karma is more, if you look at it, more about like reciprocity and balance. In a way, You know how Lady Justice has the scales, right? So that's true justice is more about balance and more about scales. So a karmic pattern could be anything that you do where you're not owning your worth, and anytime you give more of yourself away, where you're either consciously or unconsciously giving away your power or letting other people have power over you, and you're not owning the divinity that you are, that can create a karmic pattern, meaning that if you do that over and over and over again, that creates neural pathways in your brain that keep continuing that expectation, that creates an energy in your body and your aura that sends a signal to the universe that says, you know, I'm not going to make a choice to honor my self-worth. I'm going to either take on other people's stuff that doesn't belong to me or give away too much of myself. And if you keep doing that, that really starts to tip the scale. So if you look at this karma as something in the sense that you are not having a reciprocity of energy, where you are starting to give yourself away, that keeps tipping the scales, or taking on what's not yours, that is a pattern. And the more you create those patterns, the more you attract those patterns in your life. And so over time, and you can imagine over lifetimes, then you start to keep attracting more and more and more of it. And part of why that happens is your karmic patterns and all of these continual energy habits that you have are encoded in your subconscious, and this is what you expect, and this is what you attract. And in order for you to clear and heal that, you need to attract it in a way that it becomes so uncomfortable that it brings awareness. So then you bring the light of your consciousness to it, so you can make conscious choices to change. So I hope this is making sense to you so far, and feel free to comment as where you're beginning to feel or sense or see this in your life, right? So so how do you recognize when you're in a karmic pattern? When something is karmic rather than dharmic, right? So when you're in your dharma, when you're in where you're meant to be, it's an alignment, and it's a flow. And that's when you attract people and circumstances that nourish and support your self-worth, your well-being, everything about you, right? And so we all have karma. That's part of why we're on planet Earth. I mean, we're here to transmute some fear energy into love. That is, you know, it's one of the spiritual laws of the universe, and you can't avoid it. Like, there's no reason you would avoid it, because it's elevating your consciousness and elevating your soul. So the way you recognize a karmic pattern is when you're in a situation that it's one of those things where you go, why am I always in this situation? Why does this always happen to me? Sometimes you can say, am I cursed? Like, what is it about me that keeps attracting? Or what is it about me that I always get in this situation? And a lot of times you can think, was I an evil person in my past life or something? And that's not necessarily the case. You could have been like an overgiver in your past life. And so let's say you are one of these people who in many past lives have made choices where you neglect your own happiness and are a martyr in some way to benefit your family. Well, then in this life, you might attract situations where you never have time for yourself, and where you always have to like do this and this and this and this, and there's always crisis and somebody always needs you and that kind of thing. Anything in your life where you're like, why am I in this again? This is a familiar feeling, but it doesn't feel good. That's a karmic pattern. And I'm encouraging you right now, if you want to clear this karmic pattern, the very first step is in recognizing that, I know this sounds very like 12-steppy, but it's to recognize that you have, that something doesn't feel right, something doesn't feel in the flow, something doesn't feel nourishing. And so when the first step in clearing it and healing it is to just recognize, wow, this is one of these karmic patterns that I'm meant to experience now, so that I can heal it, so that I can bring my consciousness to it and recognize where there's an element in my life where I'm making a conscious or unconscious choice to not have reciprocity, or to not have ease, or to not give myself as much as I'm giving to the world or to other people. And I'm only addressing this specific aspect of it because I'm talking to you. I mean, if I was talking to a different group of people, it would be a different set of circumstances. But I'm pretty sure that if you're listening to this now, that this applies to you in some way. And I'd love to hear from you how, right? So, when someone's writing right now, I don't have fear, however, I do feel stuck, like my feet are in quicksand. And yet that could be something where it is a fear, where you have a fear of moving forward, or you have a fear of being seen, or you have a fear of being recognized for who you are. And again, this is a karmic pattern that you could be bringing into your life from past lives. Like, let's say you had a past life where you were a talented artist, but let's say you were a woman in this past life, and your husband was like a merchant or something. I'm thinking of all kind of past life-y kind of scenarios. And all the emphasis was on like how important his work was for your family. And so you just were like, oh yeah, his work is more important than mine. So I'm just going to, mine is silly. Art is like, art is a luxury, and that's ridiculous for me to even conceive of that. There's more important things that my family needs. So you might come into this life and think, what I have isn't as worthy or as important as X, Y, and Z. And then you can have some kind of fear or blocks around putting yourself out there, for instance. So that's just like one example, right? So yeah, people are saying all kinds of things about like what it is that they, what your pattern is. I'm glad that you're recognizing this. So it's any area in your life where you feel like, So here in 2019, and again, this applies to you whether you're listening to this in 2050, but in 2019, it's particularly pertinent because, and I'll tell you what I saw in the planets, and even in our numerology, 1 is the number of beginnings and 9 is the number of endings. So again, this is a year of beginnings and endings. There are a lot of endings, though, in a way, and a part of what brought that to light is the eclipses, which always bring things to light, but eclipses always bring dramatic endings and beginnings. And this particular eclipse, okay, that we began the year with, so eclipses are related to the nodes of the moon, and the nodes of the moon are specifically related to karma and dharma. The south node of the moon is all the karmic patterns that you're meant to move away from, and the north node of the moon is where you're headed, okay? And Eclipses can activate either the south node or the north node. So when the south node is the thing that's being activated, it's more of a karmic healing. It's more like, okay, this is bringing light to some past life issues, some karmic issues that need to be brought to your consciousness and finally healed. And we're in a new set of eclipses for a couple of years, and this Capricorn is in our south node and Cancer is in our north node. And it's funny, Capricorn's often related to patriarchy, and sometimes it's related to like xenophobia and, you know, kind of like old white men patriarchy and like, and those like over boundaries, they literally can relate to walls. That is like a karmic thing. And where we're headed, so because the nodes of the moon are universal, they're also personal, we experience them, but they're universal. Where we're headed, Cancer is more nurturing and more loving, and also more psychic, right? Because it's a water sign, it's very deep. Now, the eclipse, the first eclipse of the year was a new moon solar eclipse, which is about really dramatic new beginnings. Yet it was in Capricorn, so that means that like activated the south node, which is all about healing your karma and karmic closure. Now the thing is, we have a lot of Capricorn for the next 2 years and a lot of Saturn. Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma, and Saturn is the ruling planet of Capricorn. And there's so much Saturn and so much Capricorn, and there's so many times that south node of the moon in Capricorn is being activated this year. So this is why it's particular. I can't say that all of a sudden. It's very important for you to be very aware of what your karmic patterns are, because the thing is, when things are like lit up in astrology and numerology, it means like these are going to be your lessons this year. And when it comes to that focus like that, when you're not dealing with something consciously, when you're not making conscious changes, that's when the universe does it for you. So Capricorn also relates to work and status and stature and how you're seen in the world. And Cancer, so that's like karmic stuff that we're all working on. No pun intended, but it's like, you know, how that has been placed on such an importance, status and power and that kind of thing, and work and you know, the first thing we ask someone is like, what do you do? It's like, seriously, actually the first thing I ask someone is like, what's your birthday? But like, you know, in society, that's like how we identify people, and that's how we identify ourselves. And so Cancer is more about like what makes you feel emotionally secure. How do you nurture yourself and others? How do you protect your psychic self? How do you protect yourself? And also, how do you nurture without being a martyr? How do you nurture your family and your loved ones while being able to put yourself first? So there's this balance of learning how to, you know, it's not all like Capricorn bad, Cancer good. It's learning that polarity. It's learning how to integrate those polarities, because you don't want to completely ignore all your lessons from past lives or wherever we're coming from, right? It's a matter of how do you find that balance. So one of the lessons this year, and again, this can pertain moving forward because this dynamic is always happening. One of the major lessons right now is, how can you have security by creating that for yourself emotionally? And how do you make that the most important thing in your life? Is the love that you experience, not like what you do or how you do it or who you think people want you to be. It's about getting compassion for yourself and others, taking care of yourself, nurturing yourself. And Cancer is ruled by the moon, which is all about honoring your emotions and your intuitive impulses, your intuition. So this is a big dynamic happening now, and you're going to see this in areas of your life. One of the things that you're going to recognize is where you're giving away your power and where you need to nurture yourself more by having more boundaries, by having more self-love and making self-love a priority for how you can love others and be of service in the world, and even how you have status in the world. In your career, you have to make it more about like what you love rather than what you're doing, and really integrate that. And by the way, again, I'd love to hear your comments as how you're experiencing this. So I have so much more to share with you on this, and I'm going to be sharing more with you on this throughout everything, like throughout the years. I'm going to be sharing more and more insights about intuition, karma, soul contracts, law of attraction in a more soulful, spiritual way than how it's been taught. All things divine, numerology. I have so much more to share with you, but again, I could go on for hours. We have a lot to integrate now. But before I go, I want to share with you some ways that you can heal this and move through this. So the first thing to do is to recognize when you're in a situation that feels like a little too familiar, that doesn't feel good. So the first thing to do with that is to recognize, oh, this may be a karmic pattern. And when that's the case, there's always emotions that need to be processed and healed, because you can be holding on to negative feelings about yourself and others, which keeps you stuck in that karmic pattern. So first thing is to recognize that. So the second thing is to take responsibility. This is not to say things are your fault, everything's your fault. This isn't blaming you. This is to say there's always some step that you can do to liberate yourself in some way toward responding to this karmic pattern that will eventually change your experience and eventually change what you bring into your life as well. So it's taking responsibility, spiritual responsibility, that, okay, I'm in this karmic pattern, not because I'm a victim, and I'm not saying any of you have victim consciousness, but just to remind yourself, I'm in this karmic pattern because my soul wants me to elevate in some way and heal in some way. So it takes a little bit of the pressure off. It's like, you're not cursed. There's nothing wrong with you. This is simply the soul's evolution, right? So to recognize that and take responsibility. So if I am in this karmic pattern, that means I can change something now. So no matter how fatalistic or like hopeless things seem right now, I'm meant to learn something. And if I'm meant to learn something, I can. And my guides and angels and support team are here helping me with that. And sometimes it can be asking for help, whatever that means for you. Could be finding healing in some ways. It could be receiving help. So the one thing, so here's another step in this, right? Look at this in a sense like, how am I either giving away my power, or how am I contributing to this? What is it I'm afraid of doing or saying or receiving? What is it I'm afraid of that I'm not doing? So when you recognize what the fear is there, then you can take the next step and make some changes that are different than what you've been doing, because you really need to do something different than you've done before. Maybe a conversation needs to be had. Maybe you need to vocalize how you really feel. Maybe you need to say no to someone or something that isn't feeling good anymore. Maybe you need to change paths entirely. Maybe you need to focus on receiving more. Probably a combination of these things need to happen. So you can journal about this. You can talk to people about it that you trust, that maybe have some insight and really be open to listening. You could do something like, online communities, or find a counselor or whatever that can maybe help you see things that you can't. Journaling is a really great first step, because you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your soul, and you ultimately know what it is that you're afraid of, what kind of choices you've been making that have been perpetuating this. So really bring that light of consciousness to yourself without blame. So this brings me to this final step, is to process and release and transmute any feelings that come up. So this means forgiving yourself and others, because anytime you have these like blame energies, that's to yourself or others, that keeps you stuck in a karmic pattern. So letting go of blame of yourself and others and forgiving, just really take in the energy of forgiveness and let that move through you, and consciously detach from any negative or really like sharp emotions you have around someone or something, is to learn how to detach from that and let go and forgive. Again, this applies to yourself. When you do that, it really frees you of this karmic pattern. And again, it's taking those conscious steps toward doing something different. So this can take some soul searching, right? But it's liberating, and you can change these karmic patterns. Otherwise, you wouldn't be experiencing them. So I do have some resources for you that I'll list below. I do have a whole course about karma and reincarnation and how this whole thing works. I have my 2019 forecast I'll put down there for you, and something about soul contracts. I have a course about soul contracts that helps you understand why on a karmic level you attract certain people into your life in certain circumstances, and so you have more understanding around that. And again, I'm going to be sharing with you more and more resources as we move along time here, right? So this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, is share so much more with you. I'd love to hear what you'd like to know more of as well. So feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what's resonating with you, what kind of aha moments you have, and also feel free to share with us what it is that you're going to change now. I'd love to hear this. And again, if you have enjoyed this, if this has helped you in any way, please share it with other people, because it's my mission to help as many people as I can, and to help other people become the light workers that they were born to be, and have that courage to shine brightly. So I hope I've encouraged you to shine more brightly and to receive more blessings that you so joyfully deserve. And I love you so much, and I thank you. I will see you again soon. Bye for now.